Hello and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. In this episode, we'll be exploring trivia for a variety of titles from the 16-bit worldwide hit, the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or Super Famicom, was the follow-up to Nintendo's first major delve into the gaming hardware market. Coming after the NES, the Super Nintendo had a lot to live up to, and it certainly had its fair share of hype leading up to its release. Nintendo's competition had begun to pave the way for the next generation in Japan, with Sega's Mega Drive and NEC's PC Engine having already been released. Launching on November 21st, 1990, Nintendo seemed almost held back with the approach to launching the SNES on their home turf. Despite the popularity of the Super Nintendo's predecessor, the company shipped only 300,000 SNES units to retail, an incredibly small figure considering the audience waiting in anticipation. Being a shock to literally no one, all 300,000 units had sold within hours of the system's launch. To give more gravity to this small figure, at the end of its life cycle, the SNES sold 50 million units. The original NES had sold around 30 million units in the US alone by 1991, a figure which demonstrates Nintendo's strong insight into how much they knew their consoles can sell. The SNES, at the time of release in Japan, had 1.5 million pre-orders, and Nintendo had made the decision to inform the public of the scarcity of the much sought-after console, shipping only 20% of consoles that people had already paid for, leading to major panic amongst consumers. The day of release, November 21st, was a Wednesday, leading to a significant number of people opting to ditch work to get their hands on this rare item. With so many consumers rushing to the streets of Tokyo to get their hands on the system, the city became overcrowded and cost the Japanese economy millions of dollars. Looking at this, it's hard to deny that the system was extremely popular. One of the most popular titles on the system was Super Mario World. The game became so loved that it actually had its own anime adaptation, titled Mario to Yoshi no Bokenland, meaning Mario and Yoshi's Adventureland. Released exclusively for Japanese audiences in 1992, the 28-minute animation was created for Bandai's VHS system called the Terabiko. The Terabiko was a sort of interactive VHS device, released in the US as See and Say Videophone. The device had a similar appearance to that of a telephone and was connected directly to a TV or VCR and had 4 color-coded buttons. Tapes for the system would send out encoded audio signals which would be picked up by the phone to recognize the user's response, providing outcomes for both correct and incorrect answers. The animation's events differ from those of the game and have Mario asking the viewer to answer several simple questions aimed towards young children. Other Mario games on the Super Nintendo also have interesting tidbits, such as Mario World's sequel, Super Mario World 2: Yoshi's Island. Nintendo's North American advertisements in this era were known to be edgy and crude, but this style was arguably taken too far for Yoshi's Island. One commercial for the original Super Nintendo game featured a man at a restaurant eating enough food until he literally explodes. Besides being disgusting, it's also believed that this is a reference to the Mr. Creosote sketch from the 1983 movie Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Another Mario game for the SNES is Super Mario All-Stars, which was an enhanced compilation of Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, and The Lost Levels. In the Mario 2 portion of the game, the final boss was originally going to be slightly different. The Wart boss fight was originally going to have the player throw tomato projectiles like in Super Mario Bros. 2. However, these were replaced with peppers in the final game, with the tomato sprite still being present but unused in the game's data. Another huge Nintendo franchise that dominated the Super Nintendo was Donkey Kong with the Donkey Kong Country sub-series. According to Country's director Greg Mayles in a discussion with Gerard the completionist Khalil, Cranky's infamous line, "I did this using one life and I took less than an hour," during the credits sequence was the last remnant of a scrapped mode. In this mode, the player would be able to play as Cranky Kong, who would be much slower and perform poorly in general compared to Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong. This makes it all the more fitting that Cranky Kong eventually became playable himself in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze for the Nintendo Wii U and Switch. Several animated features were adapted into games, such as Disney's The Lion King. This game was very popular with gamers, selling over 1 million units in the United States alone. The original film score had been composed by Hans Zimmer, which was adapted to the SNES audio chips by Frank Klepacki. Hans Zimmer's studio was actually so impressed with the game's audio that they sent a letter to Klepacki, complimenting him on the soundtrack for the SNES release. One Super Nintendo game didn't receive the same positive response from Pixar, however. Uniracers, released as Unirally and PAL territories, was published by Nintendo, and created by DMA Design, who would later go on to become Rockstar Games. The game has players race riderless unicycles on a 2D side-scrolling track, performing stunts in order to gain speed. It wasn't long after the game's release that DMA Design was sued by Pixar for allegedly copying Pixar's designs for the game's unicycle and their concept from the 1987 short Red's Dream. DMA Design lost their lawsuit to the animation firm, forcing Nintendo to halt production of future Uniracer cartridges, meaning that only the game's initial run was ever sold, totaling just 300,000 units. Commenting on the matter with Nintendo Life, developer Mike Daly stated, "We modeled the unicycle exactly based on a real-life unicycle. The problem with Pixar was that they seemed to think that any computer-generated unicycle was owned by them. They took footage from Red's Dream and compared it to Unirally, and the unicycles were virtually the same. This isn't a big surprise, as there's not a lot of ways you can bring life to a unicycle without looking like the one Pixar did." The judge, being the moron that he was, agreed. While it was a unicycle and it did look similar, I think he should have looked at the game as a whole. If he had, then he would have noticed that the game was a completely different environment and the character of the unicycle just wasn't the same. From one, what I suppose you could call a sports game, to another, considered one of the best basketball games on the system, NBA Jam actually hides a dirty little secret. Developer Mark Tamel, a self-proclaimed die-hard Detroit Pistons fan, admitted in 2008 to ESPN that he'd actually rigged the game in his beloved team's favor. When asked if Scottie Pippen of the Bulls would have reduced stats when playing against certain teams, Tamel stated, "It's true, but only when the Bulls played the Pistons. If there was a close game and anyone on the Bulls took a last-second shot, we wrote a special code in the game so that they would average out to be bricks. There was a big competition back in the day between the Pistons and the Bulls, and since I was always a big Pistons fan, that was my opportunity to level the playing field." Yet another sports game with a secret within its code is NHL 96, which was developed by Tiburon Entertainment and published by EA. A secret message was included at the beginning of the title's ROM data aimed towards hackers and demo scene coders, reading, "If you're a talented programmer or artist, please fax us your resume to 407-862-4077. Although formal education is a plus, it's not required. This message is directed to all you hackers and demo coders out there who might be looking through our ROMs. We have good benefits and pay competitive wages. We understand that while your resume may not reflect jobs programming, that you may still be very talented and the opportunity may not have been available. In this case, we ask you to mail us your demos or examples of work you have done. Tiburon Entertainment, CO, hey, I'm good and I want a job, 900 Fox Valley Drive, Suite 202, Longwood, Florida." If you grew up with classic games, you will know all too well the pain of progressing deep into a game and finding out it's time to stop playing, only to realize the game has no save files or password system. Save features for cartridge games make use of small batteries on the game's circuit board, and with batteries only having so much juice in their lifespan, the save feature of many games will no longer function without replacing that battery. One player, Wanikun, made use of a different method for keeping their progress, simply not turning off the system for 20 years. The game Wanakun played for so long is Umihara Kawase, released exclusively in Japan for the Super Famicom before releasing on Steam internationally many years later. The cartridge and console were both left on, with the exception of one occasion when Wanakun had to move home. And now it's time for this episode's random piece of trivia. Today we're going to be looking at a fairly recent Nintendo blockbuster, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The game has some sly secrets of its own, including one in the game's Magicant stage. In the stage, Dungeon Man makes an appearance. By pausing the game and clipping the camera to the inside of his head, it's possible to see Brick Road, the operator of the dungeon from Earthbound. That's all for today, but don't forget to check out the Region Locked book. At the time of recording this, we're on 92%. We're getting so close to getting everybody those books. Join the other 1,000 people who already want to get their hands on it. The link is in the description down below. Thanks to all the patrons, and thanks to you for watching the video. Did you know there's a drunk man outside the window screaming? A little bit of Did You Know Gaming trivia for you there.